Greetings and thank you for downloading the Superb Diamond Range Show. This is your host, Superb, broadcasting from Edinburgh. This is episode 35 and it's going to be about overdrafts as part of the ongoing financial series. So I'll start off with, what is an overdraft? So an overdraft is a type of a debt or a loan that the bank can grant a customer. It acts as an extension to their already existing current account or checking account for our listeners in America. And it basically allows you to ask the bank to agree to an amount extra that you would like. So it could be something as little as £50, $50, up to 100 to 1,000 and up. And the idea behind it is it's kind of sold as a kind of a backup if you haven't got the funds in your account to cover bills or just cover everyday month expenses. Obviously it's meant for it's meant to be there to kind of assure that you pay your bills and that you don't end up with unauthorised overdrafts. So basically you could end up with fees and penalties from your bank if you don't have it in place. But of course they still charge interest on it. So it is there as a kind of means to in some ways protect you, but in other ways, as we'll go through later, can cause problems in your life. Overdraft protection is what it's sold as by the banks, and the idea behind it is that it covers shortfalls in your income. Even if you don't have sufficient funds in your account, it allows you to complete transactions that otherwise wouldn't go through. And as I mentioned earlier, it tries to help you to avoid unauthorized overdrafts, which leads to fees and penalties. So my first ever debt was an overdraft, and I'm just going to talk to you about how I got my first overdraft. It's quite interesting. I wasn't in the country when I got it. I was in Spain at the time, and I remember bringing a fair bit of savings with me on the trip and running out quite fast. I was looking for jobs and nothing was coming up, so I thought, money's getting a bit low. I'm a bit worried. What can I do? So I remember ringing my bank back in the UK, which at the time was known as Midland, but it's now known as HSBC. And I spoke to the lady on the phone and explained that I was a bit short of money and that I would like to take a loan out. And I remember the lady said to me, well, I'm really sorry, but seeing as you're in another country, you'd need to come into the branch and you'd need to fill in some forms, bring ID, in order to get a loan. And she said to me, but we do have something we can offer you. We can offer you an overdraft, which can be, I suppose, agreed verbally over the phone. So she sort of asked me what amount I wanted. And I think I started off with maybe £500. And I actually extended it. It got a bit higher throughout the next months and years. And I remember just getting into a bit of a cycle of, just thinking, this is so easy. If I need to borrow money, I can just ring the bank and ask them, and there it is. And, later on, I would get into further debt throughout my life. And, eventually you wise up, and I'm sure everyone's been through that. But yeah, that was my introduction to borrowing and debt. So they call it overdraft protection. You got to ask yourself, who are they protecting? Is it me from myself, from my bills? The best protection is yourself, having the awareness of what your bills are, as I spoke about in previous episodes. You've kind of got to know, what your bills are, what your expenses are month to month, and, put the funds in place to cover them. I'm going to speak about, I had a really good friend with a really high income, and for some reason, despite the high income, was a bit of a big spender and was always using their overdraft. And I remember just speaking to the friend about it, and he found it funny. I mean, he just didn't think anything of it. And it was a bit like myself when I was young. I didn't really understand what I was doing. And, I thought they were kind of doing me a favor by granting me this credit. But ultimately, you'll find out later you're doing them the favor by the amount of interest they collect and fees and how they're taking away what you've got, you've worked quite hard for. People will argue that they're giving you a service that you didn't have to use them. But I think a lot of people don't have the knowledge, or, for example, it's not taught in schools, about money and about borrowing money and that kind of thing. So anyway, the friend that was always going into the overdraft, my advice to him was, because he's sort of putting his income in every month and he's, living in and out of the overdraft, I sort of advised that instead of getting his income paid into that account, maybe move it to a separate account, so that then rather than seeing the overdraft and thinking, oh, that's available balance, I can spend that money, I said to him to just like chip away at, the overdraft and treat it like a debt. So almost like a separate account, because a bit like a pet you get used to having around. An overdraft is a similar thing where you're always using it, and you think it's normal to go in and out of it. So it will be like a few days till payday, and you're like, oh, I've gone overdrawn, but it's okay, I'm getting paid soon. And this is not the right attitude, because over time it just keeps happening, and interest slowly gets collected more and more. And before you know it, you start, it gets you into other types of debt. So you might be looking to take out a personal loan to pay off your overdraft. Some people get into credit cards as well, which I'm looking forward to talking about in the next episode. So yeah, ultimately you've got to try to do your best to avoid it. And another example, I had a friend of a friend, Ken, who was going for a spouse visa, and was when the authorities, looked at his bank statements, because I believe he was trying to bring a woman over from Thailand or Philippines, and they looked at his bank statements and they kind of noticed that there was a bit of a pattern developing where every month he was going overdrawn. And again, it was another guy with quite a high income, but unfortunately was spending crazy, and just, like I say, month and month, dipping into the overdraft, paying it off, dipping into the overdraft, paying off. Cycle continues. Another thing that people have got to be wary of with overdrafts is, if they're going for a mortgage, now mortgages are getting more and more difficult to get, more and more strict, more and more rules. And again, your bank statements will get checked out. I think it's 3 or maybe 6 month statements. And if they see that you're constantly going overdrawn, it's seen as a weakness. It's like, oh, you're not staying within your budget, you're spending more than you make. So that could go against you for a mortgage. And, ultimately you got to prove that you can pay them the money back for the mortgage. And it's just them seeing you going in and out, of the overdraft just doesn't look good. And of course it also, there's a lot of charges racking up as well. I should mention that even though overdrafts, people don't spend a lot of time in them normally, but there are people that spend more time in them. But because they spend such a short amount of time in it, they feel like, oh, it's not very much, I'm paying an interest, but it can be as high as 21%. And if I'm not mistaken, like payday lenders are slightly more, maybe 23%. So it's not too far off that. And I think because people are so short-lived with the overdraft, and of course there are people that spend more time in them that will notice it more, but they don't think that it seems like a lot of interest. But if you went a few months without putting your income in, say if you lost your job, or you just had a holiday and all your money was going towards that, no savings or anything, you could find that it is very expensive form of borrowing. And I mean, I have mentioned it in the previous episode 34, paying the bills, about building a cash buffer to cover your bills. So this doesn't have to be done overnight, because a lot of people will say, well, I don't have the money for it. This can be incrementally done. Even if you started as small as £10 or £25 a month, just to try and build a buffer so that, you know, in say a year, 2 years, you'll be much stronger. And I mean, people have overdrafts for 250, say, or 150. I wonder how long it would take them to have 150 in cash, you know, before they would need to have an overdraft. I mean, one argument for overdrafts is obviously going to be it's a way to build your credit, and I can kind of understand that. I mean, there are people that might still have cash buffers and have an overdraft that they never use, and it's just there to kind of like, you know, build the credit over time. But as I say, if it is something that you're using and treating it like it's okay and normal to have, then I think you need to review it and, you know, see how much it's costing you and see if it's worth it. I've mentioned, like I say, in the previous episode 34, paying the bills, where I've said like avoid direct debits. And the reason I say that is direct debits can spring surprises on you. You know, you could think that your bill for like British Telecom, say, or gas or electric is going to be the same every month. And then one month, just out of the blue, you know, you might give them a meter reading, say, and they might, oh no, this guy, this woman owes loads of money. So they'll just take it out straight away, and it will be like, it will be a shock because you won't see it coming. And that will happen with direct debits. And as I say, if you can negotiate with your bill companies to try to see if you can pay by standing order, whereby you can control how much you send to them rather than them kind of having control and being able to take what they want. You know, literally like having a pair of keys to your bank account and opening the bolted door and just like, you know, taking what they want. And of course, that is what leads people to be overdrawn. It can be, you know, spending too much. So you might, you know, buy a few sandwiches and not budget for them. And then, you know, your account can run low, or you might get some miscellaneous expenses. But as I say, if you can either build up a emergency fund of cash to kind of deal with these things, and as I say, some kind of cash buffer for your current account, you know, some people, like partners, usually may have separate accounts, and they may have a joint account for bills. So you would put X amount of money into your bills account, and again, just throwing that cash buffer in that as well will be great, you know. So you always have more money in there all the time, and month after month, seeing that there's more money there is a good feeling, and it means that you're doing things right, which is what we all need to be aiming for. Wanted to get into students and them living in their overdrafts, and again, thinking it's normal. Now, I know there is a lot of packaged student accounts. I mean, there's credit cards being marketed to students now quite a lot. But I've noticed that a lot of the student accounts with benefits, again, they might offer you a free frisbee, you know, it could be anything, but ultimately they'll try and lure you into joining. They might even offer you a free month of Spotify, or, you know, the list goes on. But anyway, they'll have overdrafts with them. And, you know, sometimes, I don't know if lucky is the right word, but you might get that they're free, interest-free for a period of time. Or maybe they're interest-free until you make a mistake, and then they will revert to interest, which is kind of what they rely on, people making mistakes and being irresponsible with the money. And, you know, that can happen with a lot of students. You get a lot of students that, you know, when they're not studying or working, they might want to party, might want to go out, that kind of thing. So, you know, they could end up maybe having a part-time job, but it doesn't bring in enough versus what they're spending. So they'll be living in their overdrafts again. And, you know, they get tempted by these interest-free offers. And it's the same with credit cards. You can get 18 months interest-free on purchases on credit cards. and you can get interest-free overdrafts for a certain period of time. And again, sometimes having it interest-free can tempt you to live in it and, build a home in it almost, because you kind of get deeper and deeper into it. And you think, well, I'm not going to be charging the interest at the moment, so I'm going to spend as much as I can, and I'm actually going to reach the limit of this overdraft. I might even ring the bank tomorrow and extend it. And I mean, I've heard of people on nights out where they've run out of money and they've literally, for a night out in a club to have a few drinks and party, they've rang their bank and asked for an extension to their overdraft or an overdraft to begin with. And, I've done it. I mean, I've done silly things with overdrafts, so I'm not judging those people. But sometimes you have to think, is it really worth it? Just to have a good night that maybe you couldn't afford anyway. You're going to take out an overdraft just so you can get drunk and, do stupid things and wake up with a hangover and, end up deeper in debt. And I want to talk about getting off the ground running. Students, although in their mind they'll be like, well, I'm studying towards something, I'm going to have a qualification, when it's all over, I'm going to be earning big bucks and I'm going to be doing what I want to do, my dream. And then sometimes the reality can be quite different. When you come out, you might find that the job that you're qualified for is not so easy to obtain. You might have to take another job, and there's other things to consider as well. You might have a long-term girlfriend that you're looking to get married to. You might be looking to get a home, like a mortgage. And, some students, they start with so much debt, and it's really difficult because they want to do all these things, but they've got all this debt that they've built up as a student, and it can be really tough. And again, they've kind of got to realize that they want to be as debt-free as possible, or at least aiming for that. And, I would say if they ever did get any kind of job, that they should aim to be out of debt as much as possible. Because this can go on into later life as well. So it could start off as a student, and then you could kind of not learn from it. And then you continue doing it once you get a job and once you're in a marriage, and that can affect the relationship and so on and so forth. So just don't be lured by these interest-free offers, and be sure that you're, doing wise things with your money. And as I say, when the time comes when it's all over and you are earning money, at least you won't be transferring your wealth to these banks, because, you should be making yourself strong, not the banks, because you don't need them, is what I'm trying to get at. There's ways around it. There's things you can do. So my overall opinion is the overdraft is a personal choice. Some people will argue that it works for them and it's got them out of trouble, and that's fair enough. And I mean, I've been overdrawn, so I know what it's like, and I am speaking from experience, but for me, it's something that I would never get again. I don't feel the need for it. I don't want one. I wouldn't advise anybody to get one. So therefore, that's just my opinion. And, I hope you found, the advice useful, and I hope that it helps you in your financial life. Anyway, thank you very much for listening to the Superb Diamond Range podcast. Again, if you do enjoy it, particularly this financial series, by all means, do recommend it to your friends and to your family. And if you get the time, if you could check out iTunes, it'd be great if you could leave a review for my podcast. All I can say to you is, just be aware of how you're looking after your finances, and remember that, it's yours and you can make the wise decisions with it. So, stay strong and, be focused and, do the right things, make wise money decisions. Anyway, that's great. Thanks again, and catch you in the next episode, which will be credit cards. I'm really looking forward to that one. Should be a great show. But for now...